Okay, I guess we could get started. Let me welcome everybody and thank you for joining us today for TL Health's first webinar, the Speaker Program Planning Cycle, which will be presented by Mike Verlotta. We'd like this presentation to be interactive, so feel free to ask questions along the way. I think most of us are familiar with Zoom. So if you want to ask a question, you just click on the Q&A icon, type in a question. Everything is anonymous. I'll be the only one that sees those questions, so you don't have to worry about that. And at the same time, we'd like to remind you that some lucky individual will win a $100 Amazon gift card. And those questions that I can't get through during the presentation, there will be some time at the end for Q&A and a wrap-up. So I'd like to introduce the speakers for today. And I guess you're probably looking at the two individuals here on the screen and saying, my goodness, they look so young. How do they have any experience to be talking about a pretty complex question like this? I just want everybody to be rest assured that we do have plenty of experience. I myself have been in the industry for 25 years. The most recent 12 years, I've been at TL Health as the president, and we are the leading insights company helping to create speaker program value for our customers. We've worked across multiple therapeutic areas, and we've collected feedback from more than 40,000 individuals. Joining us today is Mike Verlotta. Mike has 25 years of pharmaceutical experience as well, with the past 15 years at Janssen Pharmaceuticals, where he worked in the medical operations, marketing operations departments, overseeing a portfolio of products that generated close to $10 billion in sales. Mike recently left Janssen, he's retired, but still wants to remain active in the community. He started his own consulting business, and he's also agreed to be a strategic advisor for us at TL Health. Mike thought this would be a great time to present his speaker program planning cycle, as because more and more speaker programs are coming under the scrutiny of the OIG and the FDA. So now more than ever, it's very important to have those tight controls and the documentation that clearly shows a needs-based program as you move forward. At the same time, remembering about the user experience. And at the end of this program, we hope that we'll outline a nice plan for you that will help your programs become more compliant and show the documentation in place for the needs for these programs should they ever come under scrutiny from the OIG. I'm going to briefly talk about the need for speaker programs and the evolving speaker program landscape. I'm then going to turn it over to Mike, where he'll introduce and explain his speaker program planning cycle. And as I mentioned, at the end, there will be some Q&A and a session wrap-up. And in that wrap-up, there will be an opportunity for you to provide feedback on the presentation for today. It'll also allow you to suggest other topics of interest, because this is something we would like to do throughout the year, presenting topics of interest for the industry to help create better speaker programs. So why the need for speaker programs? This is taken from a study we did over the summer, this slide, where we went out to 65 healthcare professionals and we asked them about their perceived value of tools providing product and disease education. And this is consistent with other studies that we've done in the past, where speaker programs come at or near the top in every study that we do. And this is whether it's with healthcare professionals or with industry itself. And I think we all can agree that a better educated healthcare professional will lead to better patient outcome. But as we know, the speaker program landscape has been evolving, mainly due to COVID. This is a slide taken from a study that we did with industry back in November, where we asked them about the allocation of their in-person, virtual, and on-demand over the next 6 months into 2022, so looking forward. And a little bit surprising in that we see that there's almost a 50-50 split between in-person and virtual, and about 14% on-demand. And I think those of us who have been doing this for a while, prior to COVID, virtual may have been 5, 10%, and probably nothing in the on-demand area. But I think that COVID did present an opportunity, if I can say opportunity, that companies have moved to this virtual space. And some companies are looking at this as an opportunity to perhaps reach customers they may not have been able to reach in the past. And some companies are starting to experiment with things like the length of a virtual program, which speakers can present in a virtual setting, and also including things like in-program polling, which can also help to increase engagement in a virtual setting, something that we hear that our customers really enjoy. So virtual has presented this opportunity because, as we know, not every physician will go to a live dinner program, and trying to get a speaker to a physician's practice presents other logistical issues. So virtual may be able to allow industry to reach customers that they may not have been able to reach before. So now I'd like to take a poll concerning virtual. And over the next 6 months, of all the speaker programs you will be running, what percent will be the following type of program? So let me launch this poll. And you can see the different options available, 100% live, etc. So I'll give people an opportunity to complete this poll. Okay, so as we can see that we have about a 25% virtual, 75% live, 50-50, so consistent with what we did back in November. And some of us are still at that 100% virtual. So this is something that we should continue to follow, especially now that it looks like some of the guidelines are relaxing and more people can go into a live setting. So now let me turn it over to Mike, who will take us through his speaker program planning cycle. Mike, if you would, please.
Great. Thanks, John, and welcome to all of our guests here on the call today. Some of you I may actually know and have had the opportunity to speak with and work with in the past. So thanks again for taking your time. I want to just take a few minutes and walk us through this 5-step process. And what I want to start with is that here we are, we're now in March. It's hard to believe it's already March. And there is no particular time that you have to start this cycle. However, what I tend to think of is my speaker programs start of the year. And in my cases in history have always been January 1st through December 31st. So we're early on in the speaker program year. And therefore, I am for this talk going to start with our post-program evaluations. So, John. So post-program evaluations, what do they do? Well, they do several things for us, several very positive things. They help us understand the quality of the programs and our speakers, which is very important. It ensures we're meeting attendees' educational needs and that our information is relevant. And we determine the program's effectiveness through multiple stakeholders' eyes, because we have physicians, we have nurse practitioners, we have PAs coming to programs. Sometimes we have nurses, sometimes practice managers, depending on the type of program. So we get to see the effectiveness through many people's eyes. The importance of these things is program evaluations is you get lots of numbers, and you can make changes on the fly throughout your programming year to better accommodate the needs of the attendees as you go. So the program polls, post-program evaluations come back. It allows you to look at them, and you can make changes on the fly throughout the course of the year. But also this data can be accumulated and aggregated and start to build out your needs assessment for your next year 2023 programming.
All good points, Mike. And we actually have a question. So do you have any recommendations to increase completion rates?
Yeah, so I do. Sometimes not always that easy to implement and get people to do, especially it depends on how you do it. If you think about in the old days how we did this, we would put a piece of paper on the table and ask them to fill it out as they were leaving the room. So dessert in their mouth, chewing on dessert, walking out the door, talking to their buddies, yucking it up. Not very effective in getting them back. Electronically, though, it can present some challenges as well, because we don't see them actually taking the poll. We don't know if they did it. At least if it's paper, the rep is collecting the sheets of paper. So here's some tips I recommend if you're doing it electronically. And by the way, I do recommend doing this electronically, is incorporate it into your polling. So you'll poll throughout your program, and then basically these become, your post-program evaluation becomes questions that you ask at the end of the program, but not at the very end of the program. I would save a little bit of icing, if I may, for after they're done doing this post-program evaluation. Speaker ends the program, thanks everybody, tells everybody it was a great program. Before I take your individual questions, let me ask that you complete the post-program evaluation. And you pause for a second, let them start taking that post-program evaluation, and then say, okay, now that you've all started to do your post-program evaluations, let me, while you're doing that survey, answer some of your questions. What are some of those questions? The likelihood of getting them to do it is much greater doing something like that than waiting until all the Q&A is done, everybody's done, their cake is done, and they're walking out the door asking them to do it on their way home or the next day. And in that case, you'll get low numbers. So there are some ways that you can get them to do it a little bit sooner in the program that would be before the official quote unquote close of the program.
Mike, what about kind of telling the attendees that this isn't really a nice to have, that more and more, we're getting pushback from like the OIG as to, presenting the value of the program, that if they want something like these to continue moving forward, that it's really important for them to provide their honest feedback.
Yeah, so John, I'm not a market researcher like you are. I think you have to be careful you don't bait the witness there a little bit.
Right.
But certainly explaining to them that we do take these polls very seriously. And this is something that I think can be trained to the speakers. Let the speaker know that, hey, I'm asking you to take this poll for two reasons. One is that the feedback that you provide helps me become a better speaker, and will also help the company bring to you better programs, more educational programs that you so desire. So it's a win for the speaker, it's a win for the audience, and it's a win for the company. And if you can sort of position it that way, I think more people are inclined to do it.
Good points, Mike.
So let's talk about the second area that we collect data, in-program polling. And why is this so important? Well, certainly in-program polling tells us, are we effective or are we not effective? We ask a question potentially before we start the program or early on in the efficacy section. We ask a similar question or sometimes the same question at the end of the efficacy section, and that could apply to safety as well. And we see, did we get a difference in response? Did we really teach them anything? Did they learn something from the time we started that section to the time that they ended that section? Critical for us in the program, but also for us to collect that data and be able to use it at a later time. What this also does, and I think John mentioned it earlier, is that it increases audience engagement. Certainly one of the things that we struggle with quite a bit, especially in the virtual world, is audience engagement. So having a polling question really keeps people on their toes, that you're going to expect them to participate. You're going to expect them to be involved. And I would set that expectation right from the very beginning of the program, where the speaker would say, there are going to be several poll questions. I'd really appreciate if all of you participated in the poll questions. And then what also polling allows us to do is start to identify gaps or opportunities for us to provide more or additional education. So now we start to collect our data, right? We have post-programming survey data, we have in-program polling, and then we have the next category.
And before we go on to the next category, I would like to add that there has been studies that showed that this in-program polling also helps to increase retention. And studies have shown as much as 70%. Because if you think about it, as you pointed out, you're asking the question up front, then the audience gets to answer the question, and then the speaker can comment on what was the correct answer, whatever. So they see the information 3 times. Yeah. And as we all know, in today's society, when you're sitting at a deep dinner program, and you know that you're not going to be asked any questions or not to engage with the audience, sometimes your mind starts to wander and you may get distracted. So I think polling helps to kind of reel people back in. And the other thing is, we did a study over the summer with medical oncologists, and we asked them about polling. Did it actually increase the value of the program? And in fact, 80% of those medical oncologists said, in fact, yes, it did, and they actually liked polling. So definitely something to consider. It helps with engagement, helps with retention, and I think people like to see how other customers are responding to the similar questions. So, being that we're talking about polling, how about we launch a poll? And in this particular question, or poll, excuse me, we're going to ask you, are you currently using in-program polling during your programs currently? So let me launch the poll. Okay, I'm going to end the poll and I'm going to share the results. And it looks like most people are not using in-program polling, with only about 20% saying yes.
That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
So the third area that I wanted to cover off on, John, is speaker needs assessments. You might call these different. These may be speaker surveys, but typically done once a year, and typically done, what I like to say, is in the early part of the third quarter, the August timeframe. Why is the time frame important? Because again, it's more data that I'm going to use to build out my annual needs assessment that I need for my compliance team, which is our fifth step. In the speaker needs assessment, what are we assessing? Well, we're assessing things like, are our logistics good? Are our operations going well? Is the content of the program good? What can we do better to help them as speakers be better teachers, be better educators? It also gives me an opportunity to ask them, what can we do for future improvements? What are the needs of the future? What other topics may be that involve that we could do to provide? So now we have some data coming in from our audience. We have data coming in from our speakers, and we're going to talk about the fourth one here in a moment. But one of the other things I found doing these speaker surveys or speaker needs assessments is it helps you build some level of relationship with your speakers. If you don't ask them what's wrong, they go around telling everybody, complaining about your speaker bureau not being this, not being that, not being good here, not being good there. But if you show a genuine concern to them and you say, hey, I'm willing to ask you these questions. Are you willing to give me the answers for these questions? And I'm willing to make changes based on your feedback. And that's important. When you make a change, tell them what change you made based on the feedback that they gave you. So again, third component of building up data so that now I can start building out my needs assessment. And again, I like to do this probably in the August timeframe if you're considering starting your speaker bureau for 2023, January 1st.
I couldn't agree more, Mike. And having done these types of assessments in the past, I think the speakers are going to provide some really good insight to not only the future programs, but also to the programs that they're doing currently. You'll get feedback from things like, hey, which slides may be tripping them up. They'll give you comments like, hey, every time I get to this slide, I struggle with the material, which can then come back to industry and say, hey, maybe this is an area where we need to go back and do some re-education on how to present this material. They'll also give you feedback regarding the content that, hey, we have 3, 4, 5 slides on the same topic, slide after slide. Maybe we should think about condensing that. And I don't think anybody in attendance is going to complain about a shorter program. So you can get a lot of good feedback from the speakers. Now we're getting some more questions. Can you provide any insight from the key stakeholders as to the number of programs to have?
So good question. That's typically not the area that I would go to. I wouldn't go to my speakers to ask for the number of programs that they think we should have. The reason being is if I went to the speakers, many speakers want to speak. They're speaker hounds, right? They want more and more talks. They want to make more and more money. So I'm not sure they're an independent source, enough independence there to actually count on what they have to say. Most speakers, when I've seen, are you doing enough talks, always answer that question, no. And that's for speakers I've seen that are doing a lot of talks and speakers that are doing almost no talks. They all want to do more talks. So I'm not sure that's where I would go. Where I would go to determine the number of programs that I have is, first off, it starts with your target market. How big is your target? And maybe just by way of example, and this is really off the cuff here, let's just say your target audience is 10,000 HCPs. That includes physicians, nurse practitioners, and PAs. It's 10,000 individuals. And you know, by just sake that you do 10, you get 10 attendees per program. And that's probably being very liberal, but let's just say you get 10 attendees per program. That would tell me to cover my target audience on a topic, I would need to do 1,000 programs. In a perfect world, I'd need to do 1,000 programs to get all 10,000 folks. Now, there's a couple flaws in that approach. One is you almost seldomly get 10 HCPs to prescribe MPs, PAs, and physicians. Number two is that even if you did get 10, there are programs that you may get 6 and 4 and 3, so you'd probably need more than 1,000 programs. But at least gives you some starting point. And what I typically use is historical data to build out my average number of attendees. And then from that average number of attendees, it helps me back into the number of programs that I could potentially do if budget allowed me to do it.
Okay, got another question, Mike. What about, how do you determine the number of speakers?
Okay. It's sort of all ticked and tied in a calculation in my eyes. So once I know, so let's use the prior example, 10,000, 10 people per program, 1,000 programs. So I got 1,000 programs. What I also use is my historical data to look at what is the average number of programs that a speaker has done historically, speakers do historically. So I take all my speakers, all the programs I've done, and I find out that the average speaker does 5 programs a year, 6 programs a year, 8 programs a year. I'm going to make this simple, 10 programs a year for this case, for this example. So now I have a potential need to do 1,000 programs, and my average speaker does 10 programs. That would tell me that I would need somewhere around 100 programs, or sorry, 100 speakers. So that's sort of how all this math ticks and ties and how this data pulls together to start setting up the number of programs that I need and the number of speakers that I might need. If you're a new product and you don't have that, I would tell you that you know how many target audience you have. I'd tell you that historically, and this goes back to some data that I know IQVIA has put out there and other major speaker bureau companies, probably the average number of attendees is in that 6 to 8 range, maybe a little bit lower depending on your specialty, especially rare diseases. Primary care may be a little bit higher. So now that sort of helps you back into the number of programs, and your number of speakers your first couple of years is a little bit of a litmus test. But I would tell you it's easier to have fewer speakers and add speakers than have too many speakers, not use them, and then them not meeting your policy requirements at the end of the year.
Okay, Mike, I'm impressed you were able to keep all those numbers straight in your head, even though we're using multiples of 10, but okay, let's get on to the next topic.
So the fourth category that I feel like is part of the cycle is somewhere again now in the fall of the year, early fall, September timeframe, I like to do an HCP needs assessment. This is where I'll take my target audience, work with a market research group within our company, and then with a market research company and themselves to actually field an HCP needs assessment. And this will go out to all sorts of HCPs around the country that will start to tell me what types of programs or topics they wish to have covered in a certain disease state. So providing them certain information so that they can come back and be very specific about what learnings they have, where their gaps are, what they want to hear more about. It also starts to build program or your customer value and your customer needs. So from that survey, I'm getting data that now helps me start to build out a broader needs assessment for my programming for the next year. And then it also helps me stay current on changes within the industry to assess my improvements. They might tell me, hey, and we're hearing a little bit about this. I was surprised that I think there were 2 individuals that said 100% virtual. There's a lot of scuttle going on out there where some physicians are now saying, I'm done with virtual. I will never attend another virtual program. Now, that's not all of them. Likewise, we've had the other end of that scale where physicians are saying, I'll only attend a virtual program. So what does that tell us? That tells us that we need a mix of programs, both live and virtual. But this survey can help us assess how strong their feelings are on these 2 subject matters as well.
All great points, Mike. How does this differ from the post-program evaluations?
Because this survey is actually going out to a broader group. Post-program surveys are only going out to those that attended the program. Right. This particular survey is going out to those that may never have attended a single program that my company put on. This survey is going out to individuals that may never attend anybody's programs. Some programs may only do virtual programs, may only do live programs, may only do certain types of programs. So you're getting a better cross-sectional area of what your target physicians are doing.
Good points, Mike. Another question, what should we be asking our customers around the customer experience?
Well, I think there's a lot of questions. It's a pretty open-ended question there, but I think there's a lot of things. One of the things should be, do speaker programs meet your educational needs? Do speaker programs provide you with information that allows you to better care for your patients? Do speaker programs help you better understand dosing, efficacy, and safety of a product? These are all types of questions that you should be asking that help establish, this value that we're giving to our customers when we do these things.
I think I would also add, Mike, that around the customer's experience, and you were touching on it earlier, about providing options. Prior to COVID, it was like, we've got a live dinner program, take it or leave it. I think now some companies are saying, hey, let's offer up virtual. Let's provide on demand. On demand offers an opportunity, having done this in the past, where, and I'm dating myself here, we had a company that we worked with prepared CDs with the latest and greatest oncology developments. And physicians actually loved it because you may not be able to get to a dinner program. You may not even be able to get to a virtual program, but everybody's sitting in a car for a half hour to 45 minutes to an hour going to and from work. You pop these CDs into the CD player and get current by the time they landed in the office. So providing different options around the user experience, I think, is a great idea.
Yeah.
And it says here, got another question. Are you okay, you already addressed this. Are you reaching out to those that do not attend? And the answer was yes. Yeah. So let me get on to the next slide.
So finally, the 5th part of the cycle really is the internal part of the cycle. And most of us, if not all of us on this call, are now going to really more so than ever be scrutinized by our compliance, regulatory compliance departments, maybe even your legal teams, to establish a needs assessment, a full needs assessment for your next year's speaker bureau. Typically, again, if you want to kick off your bureau January 1st, these needs assessments are completed in that October timeframe. Now, the other 4 topics gave you the data to build this, but this is the most crucial part. And if you don't have any of the data we just talked about, if you don't have post-program surveys, if you don't have polling results, if you don't have speaker assessments, if you don't have HCP needs assessment surveys, you don't have that data, what are you using to build your needs assessment? I asked that question a bit rhetorically because there is no answer to it. What do you have? It would just be my opinion. And certainly, I think after the special fraud alert, nobody wants it to be marketing's opinion that they need speaker programs, because marketing will justify speaker programs on their own terms. What you need is a pure needs assessment with validated and verified data that would suggest that these type of learnings, these type of engagements are positive, they have positive impact on the physicians, positive impact on their patients and their care, and that ultimately at the end of the day, patient outcomes will be improved because of speaker programs. But it also helps us justify our operations, the number of programs we're going to do, the number of speakers that we're going to have. It also helps us to ensure that we're being compliant along the way. All this stuff will add up and create a very nice story, a needs assessment story that your compliance team will likely read through. Your legal regulatory teams may be involved and give you that blessing, if I may, to go ahead and launch your programming for the following year. And that's whether it is a newer product in that 0 to 18 2-year month range, or whether it's a mature product. And some people say, well, mature products don't need education. I would argue against that. Many of the mature products need a lot of education. There's tons of data, more and more data coming out every day. They may have label extensions. They have data that's consistent with the label. They have metadata, all sorts of data that's coming available that physicians are eager to digest and make decisions on their prescribing based on that data. So if you can validate that through a good, strong needs assessment, it will validate you doing speaker programs even on mature products.
So Mike, how often are you meeting with compliance to discuss the program plan?
Well, I think that's going to vary from company to company. Most of the time, though, you do your annual needs assessment in the fall of the year, just before you start opening up your POs for the next year programming. So probably open your POs in late 2022 for early 23. And before you open those POs, you need the needs assessments. I actually think, though, that it's a good idea to do a check-in along the year with HCC to say, hey, want to share with you our post-program polls, our in-program polling. Want to share with you these results to show you that not only was there a need, but they're telling us that that need, what we're doing is meeting or justifying, is being justified in doing so. So, John, great question. No definitive answer, but I think there should be probably at least a midpoint check-in with HCC to say, hey, look, want to share with you that we are meeting our customers' needs. Hopefully.
Great point. Oh, great points, Mike. So I think we'd now like to take a minute, if you would please, for our audience to please scan this QR code. We'd like to take a pulse of what you thought of this program. There's also an opportunity here for you to suggest other topics you'd like to present or have us present, as well as if you yourself are passionate about a particular subject and would like to be considered for an upcoming webinar, there's a section for you to do that as well. And so we'll take a minute here for you to complete this survey. It should only take about a minute or two. And then we'll get to some of the questions we weren't able to address during the presentation. So please scan that QR code and take in that little evaluation. Okay, while they're filling out the evaluation, I think we can try to address some of these questions that we weren't able to along the way. And the first question we have is, how does this help meet OIG standards?
Well, ultimately, we never know what the OIG may come looking for, but I think it was very clearly stated by the OIG in their special fraud alert dated December of 2020. It's hard to think that it's already been over a year and a half ago that they did that. But I think they were very clear stating that these programs should be done based on need and that they should not be done as purely marketing driven efforts to promote and I think in their terms, probably push product upon HCPs to use. And I think that's been their whole beef with speaker programs, is that the meal is an inducement to use more of the product, that the alcohol, now we know we're not doing alcohol, the alcohol in the meal is an inducement to use product. I actually think that what they would love to see is that if you have a good, solid, strong needs assessment built, that you're now substantiating the need to do these programs. And that hopefully if you do it right and your needs assessment is well done, you could actually say that the food and liquor, although we don't do that anymore, the food is now an afterthought and the program becomes the primary reason for them wanting to be there.
Yeah, I think, Mike, with all the things that you've outlined here, you're clearly going across multiple segments. So as you mentioned, you're talking to your speakers, you're talking to your customers, you're doing different evaluations with them, and you have the documentation that's, as you mentioned, creates that needs-based program and validates what you're doing moving forward. Here's another question that we got. Who should be the point person for this planning cycle?
Well, again, I think it's hard to answer that specifically who it is. It is probably typically within a marketing organization, somebody manages your speakers bureau, whether that is a product manager, whether that is a marketing operations team, whether that is some other form of team that maybe it's a speaker program management team specifically. It is not compliance that's going to manage this. Compliance is the one that watches over and safeguards it. It should not be the sales organization, clearly not the sales organization. Could medical be involved? I guess medical could potentially be involved, but generally speaking, it's going to be a product manager, it's going to be the marketing operations team, or some similar like department within the marketing commercial team that would manage something like this. Gotcha.
Another question, is there any value in reaching out to the sales force regarding their thoughts? You know, you mentioned the speakers, healthcare providers. Salesforce isn't in there, Mike.
Yeah, I was waiting to hear if somebody was going to ask that question, actually, so I'm glad they did. I have mixed feelings about it because I believe that Salesforce has very different goals and objectives of what they're trying to get at. And if you ask a sales rep, and I'm being very hypothetical here, if I was to ask a sales rep, what did they think of the speaker program that the doctor delivered the night before? I'm either going to, I know what answer I'm going to get. I'm going to get one or two answers. I'm going to get, it was great or it was bad. Nothing typically in between. Well, what makes it great to them? What makes it great to them is the doctor did a great job helping them sell their product. The doctor really promoted the product. The fact that if the doctor was maybe not promoting the product, but merely getting a good, strong educational message across about the efficacy, safety, fair balance of the product, or whatever it may be, the mechanism of action that may be included in there, the trial designs that were going in, and people were truly learning, that may not be sufficient to the sales representative. They may actually not like that. So historically, I had asked the sales reps, and what I found was exactly that it was very polarizing responses. They either loved it or they hated it. And if they hated it, it was most oftentimes because the doctor was probably doing a good job. And when they loved it, it was probably because the doctor was getting too promotional in my mind. So if you're going to ask your Salesforce questions, be very careful, really watch, really study and know what question you're asking and why you're asking it, and sort of play out in your mind what you might expect to get as an answer. Because if you don't, it can really be quite contrary to what the actual attendee said. Rep says lousy program, attendee said great program, which is correct.
Gotcha. Another, I guess it's a follow-up. It says here, is there value in going out to the audience, going out to the sales force to poll them to ensure that they're current on their compliance guidelines around speaker programs?
Love it. Love it. Yeah. I can't stress enough that you need to regularly and routinely keep educating sales representatives about what they can and cannot do for speaker programs. That includes everything from, I remember many years ago an occasion where a sales rep got up and contradicted a speaker. The speaker called me the next day and was livid because the sales rep contradicted them. Sales reps said, well, I didn't know I can't do that. I didn't think that, whatever their excuse was. So I think with the amount of turnover that many companies go through in a sales force, in sales management and sales leadership on an annualized basis, it cannot hurt to have some form of continuing ongoing education around speaker programs for our sales organization. Long answer, but very simple. Yes, do it.
Couldn't agree more with you, Mike. And that's all the questions we have. So, Mike, a special thank you for you pulling this together. I think you presented a lot of great ideas to help these programs become more compliant with a needs-based, well-documented approach to speaker programs. Thank you for the audience. We got a lot of great questions. Hope we got some good feedback on the evaluations. And as a reminder, Amazon gift card will go out tomorrow, so don't forget to check your email. Thanks again and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.